Good morning. Thanks for having me. And I was excited to see that piece. I was wondering what that was. I want to talk about something similar, I think. A lot of what we talk about when we talk about data visualization is about telling stories, communicating what's inside the data. And a lot of that has a tendency to express itself as a kind of crisp representation and a kind of way of telling a story that somebody already wants to tell. And essentially, you're using data visualization as another way to tell the story that they already know about. What we call this as answer-making interfaces at the studio. The idea that you have a thing that you want to communicate, you have an answer that you want to communicate, and you build an interface to do that. A lot of journalism, a lot of data visualization in the service of journalism works this way. What we're interested in is exploring that for sure, but also in this idea of question-making interfaces, that rather than using a visualization to come up with an answer, you use it to come up with better questions, which can then lead to answers. And so we're doing this as part of a commercial practice at Stamen in San Francisco. Most of the work that I'm going to show, thanks, is I'll be brief. You can take a look at more of it at stamen.com, but this is client services work. This isn't work done as research or art, although sometimes we do get the chance to do that, both alongside and kind of in connection with our client work. So I want to show three projects. I'll go through them really quickly, but they can be kind of fun. So the first is visualizing financial data. You know, I'd like to get a little less light on this. Is that possible? Can we turn these lights down or off? You don't need to see me. Is that possible? Sorry? Yeah, it's too dark. Is that possible? Sorry, I don't mean to be a pain. Well, can you see this okay? I guess so, right? So this is a view of NASDAQ financial data that we put together for the stock exchange. And it's a non-traditional view. It shows a minute of NASDAQ data. So it's a minute from here to there, time going that way. Each one of the dots is a stock trade. In this instance, the stock trades are colored by which stock is being traded. So these are all the same stock. These are the same stock. These are the same stock. They're sized according to the size of the trade. So a small dot means a very few stocks being traded, and a larger dot means a very great many stocks being traded. Value is represented vertically, so those are cheap stocks. Those are expensive stocks. This here is NASDAQ pinging the system continuously on a millisecond basis to make sure that the system is still working. And so if we color this by stock, we see a lot of variation, but of course we see that there's some regularity, right? These are two of the same, these are traded by the same stock is being traded, the same stock is being traded. If we color it by trader, we see that a lot of that activity is being done by the same mover. It's a market maker called Knight. And if you remember, they were the ones that released beta software into the live stock market, and something like $43 billion evaporated in a matter of minutes. Here again, we've got color equals stock. That green bar is the same stock being traded at the same amount over and over again at the same price. And there again, there's our friend Knight. So those are pretty kind of basic, regular trades. But we also start to see some really interesting patterns when we start to look at the non-regular kind of representations. And so here there's this kind of haze of a bunch of different stocks, all being traded at very small amounts across a very definite spectrum of prices and a very definite spectrum of time. We can visually this can leap out at us and it can become a pattern, and if you arrange it by trader, you get that. So this is when you hear about algorithmic trading or you hear about these robots that are moving on the stock market, that's what they look like. That's a robot shaking the stock market and trying to extract a tiny little bit of value out of very, very small trades. We can see the same thing happening here. A lot of variety, and then if we change it by trader, we start to see another robot. So this idea that without looking for them, by simply measuring over and over again, you can start to ask questions like, what the heck is that? So I want to go through what about 2 minutes of trade on the stock market looks like. This is pre the market opening. We've got we've got NASDAQ, and we've got a couple little robots in there. And as we move forward in time, each one of these is moving forward about 10 seconds. We see some more robot activity there. Then about a minute before the stock market opens, we see just a total rash of tiny, tiny little trades. These are essentially the robots waking up and saying, it's time to go, come on, let's play. We see that stop for a little while. This is something that I don't know what it is yet, but this line that's happening here, I think this is a couple of traders kind of colluding with each other to essentially drive the price of a stock up. But they're not buying very much of it, so I think they're just kind of trying it to see if they can do it. That's 9 o'clock in the morning as the warning bell, as the bell goes off, with giant, massive trades, and then it kind of calms down. But you see this kind of crazy stuff in here. You see that teal, and that purple. Those are the same stocks being traded at higher and lower values by a computer in the space of about 2 seconds. So someone's getting ripped off right there. Then things calm down for a little while, and about a minute in, we see our first robot right in there. So this is all kind of fun, but the reason to do it is for me is to sort of be able to, rather than kind of deal with the sort of standard stocks and charts and graphs and just the same old kind of line going up and to the right, to kind of just see what we could find. This was a study done for NASDAQ. We were talking about putting this in Times Square as a way of getting people more engaged with what was happening on the stock market. Another project I want to briefly hit on is a project we've put together for Climate Central. They're an agency in New York that is trying to communicate what's going on with climate change around the country. The project was inspired by one of these mugs. This is a mug that you can buy. It's called the Climate Change mug, and it's got the regular coastlines on it, and then you pour hot tea or hot cocoa into it or something, and the coastlines shrink a little bit. And it's kind of a gag, and it's kind of fun. The overall impression, though, is that so we lose a little bit of land, who cares? Right? I mean, the continents are still just as big as they were before. You just lose a little bit of the coastline. So we wanted to invert that, and rather than have that be a thing where the land shrinks when climate change happens, we wanted it to be that the land that's underwater grows. And so we put together maps where the land that stays is very kind of muted and kind of de-emphasized, but then the map is essentially a map of the land that's going to be underwater. And this is a map of New York City underwater about 10 feet. It is. And this is what this is. So this is about where the boundaries are. We had this experience of thinking 10 feet is crazy. How the climate's never going to go up 10 feet. But of course, Sandy was up to 13 feet. So this is one of those examples where we kind of thought that we were going to have. We thought that we were being outrageous, and it turns out we were being very conservative. And data visualization is a kind of fun way to directly engage with that. So I'll just show you what that looks like for San Francisco. You're lucky over here in Berkeley. You don't actually get very much, even if it's up 10 feet. I guess we're on hills. But this here we see basically the land rising about 4 feet, 5 feet. Basically, Mission Bay comes back, and we return to something that looks like the original waterfront in town. There's a whole back end that goes along with this. You can see how many schools and how many power plants and how many what vulnerable populations are affected by this work. So I'd also like to briefly dip into this idea of maps as a kind of data visualization. I used to sort of I'd go into bookstores and people would ask me, what do you do for a living? And I'd say, well, I do data visualization, and they'd just kind of be like, huh. But I had this realization that I was buying a book on maps, and someone asked me what I did for a living, and I said, well, I make maps. And she was like, oh, cool. And so that kind of got me going, this idea that you can start with maps and then lead into data visualization, because it's kind of a bear of a word. And they're very similar. The process of making them is very similar. The tools that are used to make them is very similar. And the kind of workflows and the kind of people that do them are very similar. So we definitely do both. So this project is similar to the NASDAQ project. Is a desire to try and kind of kick the sometimes stay at work of map making into a new place. We essentially are taking OpenStreetMap data, which is kind of Wikipedia for maps. It kind of has all the great things about a thing like Wikipedia and all the bad things, which is super detailed in some areas, not in others, cursing, fighting. But we've essentially taken that and sort of thrown out some of the general kind of standards of cartography, essentially that all the roads need to be on there, and tried to bring a watercolor kind of feel to that, and to see what would come out of it. And for me, the fun part here is you start to get into this kind of stuff, where if you don't necessarily just sort of choose one road over the other, but you blur them together, you get these areas in here where, if you know downtown Manhattan at all, it's kind of one big freeway. At least those little sections of it. So this project was responsible for a pretty, in addition to my son being born earlier this year, I kind of lost pretty significant productivity for about 4 months because I just would come into work every day and type in Amsterdam, type in Delft, and just kind of see what happens. And this idea of visualization as a thing where you kind of set up a series of rules and of aesthetic parameters, and then you feed data through it and see what comes out the other side. That's a big part of the kind of creative process, and then also about the client process. So there's Paris and London and other places like that. That's Tokyo. It's a freeway in LA. So there's the Forbidden City in Beijing. And for me, what's remarkable about some of this stuff is that the thing that Google Maps and the new Apple Maps sort of brought to people's attention is that it's possible to do this stuff wrong. And the thing that Google Maps did was to essentially make it feel like the maps just kind of dropped out of the sky and were all made by robots. And it turns out they're actually made by hand, all of them. And all of this stuff, all of this sort of OpenStreetMap stuff, this is all done by volunteers by hand, going in and laboriously saying, this is a dock, this is a road, this is a street, this is an ocean. So we wanted to kind of honor that. And just to conclude, so to talk a little bit about the kind of working process behind the way this work is done, the kind of traditional waterfall model of project management says you've got one axis, which is, you start off, you've got a problem, and you want to arrive at a solution. So as time goes by, you separate the work into distinct phases. The exploration phase, the planning phase, the building phase, the refining phase, and there's documents at every model, and then time goes by, and then by the time you're done, you're done. The work that I'm showing uses a project model that's kind of much more like this, where you start off with a problem and you immediately take very rapid steps towards a possible solution, and you try, and you allow yourself to essentially go back and restate the problem in the middle there, and you always keeping your eye on the fact that at some point you're going to run out of time and you need to deliver something. Thanks very much for listening, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the speakers. Thank you.